we see what we're creating as like a transportation revolution. It's going to be the same as what the railroads did. It's going to be the same as what the automobile did. It's going to be the same as what passenger aircraft and jet aircraft did.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Next Big Thing HQ, where we interview founders and showcase startups raising capital via Reg CF. Today, we have a real treat. We have a serial entrepreneur joining the podcast today, someone who's trailblazing the future of water transportation, a YC alum with 2 successful exits. We have the founder of Valo, Ed Kearney. Ed, thank you for joining the pod today.
Great to be here, Connor.
So I came across this quote. I feel like it might hit pretty close to home for you. And it's the best way to predict the future is to invent it. So Ed, how is Valo inventing the future of water transportation?
Great question. So when I look out at waterways, so we're in Alameda, California, we look out across the water to Oakland. I take the Bay Bridge to work. It's full of traffic. The 880 around Oakland is full of traffic. And the water that the bridge goes over is pretty much completely empty. There's a few giant passenger ferries, but other than that, there's not much going on. And when it comes to like how we experience the water, you know, you can't like just go for a walk along a lagoon, in the lagoon, you'll sink. So what we're kind of predicting and building the future is what would happen if it was as easy to navigate on water as it was on land and travel and explore and utilize it for mobility and transport. So that's kind of the core of what we're building. And the way we're doing that is we're using hydrofoil technology, which means you can now move on water super efficiently, super smoothly, and also super quietly.
So explain Valo and the concept before you get into what hydrofoil is and the technology behind it.
Yeah, so Valo as a company, we're making hydrofoil electric boats and systems for boats. So we're starting with a 2-person recreational personal watercraft. There's an older render of it behind me here. It's going to offer very exhilarating and silent and environmentally friendly experience on the water. Very futuristic, very exciting thing to ride. And then after that, we're going to be taking the same technology, so the hydrofoil technology, the software control systems, and packaging that up into a system that other boat builders can install on their existing models, enabling them to, you know, meet the demands of the market in terms of emissions reduction and zero emissions kind of technology, while still having a product that customers actually like. Hope that explains what Valo does.
Yeah. Well, so when I was looking at the design, what it looks like is almost if you take a wing from a plane and put it underneath the boat and then have 2 rods going up into the boat so that through propelling forward, the water rises the boat so the boat almost elevates off the water. Is that correct?
That's a pretty good explanation of how hydrofoil works. The core question is, how do you oppose the gravity force that the vehicle creates by having mass? Traditional boats do it using buoyancy. So just the water pressure underneath the hull, pushing the hull back up. And then as it starts moving, you know, faster moving boats will use a planing force, which is a much more crude form of lift. And the technology has been around for over 100 years, but only really starting to become popular and exciting in the last 10 is you take an aeroplane style lifting wing, you put that under the water, it creates lift, which opposes the gravity or the weight of the vehicle. And then you can get the whole vehicle pretty much entirely out of the water, except for your tiny little wings and propulsion system. Yeah. This means that the drag drops by a factor of like 10, and the energy efficiency can go up by a factor of like 15. So the same amount of energy can get you 15 times further, which is a huge game changer.
And I would also imagine you can go really, really fast with these, you know, using the hydrofoil technology because there's less friction or less resistance. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. You can go quite a lot faster with like a smaller power unit. The issue with, you know, most recreational boats, let's say anything up to about 45 feet, is if you do want to go at a decent speed, you need huge engines. And those huge engines use a lot of gas and they cost a lot of money. No one really uses boats for anything other than recreation. There's a few commercial opportunities out there. You know, the Coast Guard has a patrol boat, things like that, but it's just pretty much for spending money. Your average cruiser boat, you know, 30 foot going at about 30 knots, about 1 mile per gallon, probably about $5 a minute to run that boat. So it's pretty much just for the weekends if you've got a bit of money to spend. But our technology is going to change that and bring the cost way down so you can actually use these vehicles for all kinds of other things.
So you mentioned it's environmentally friendly. It reduces the amount of energy consumption. This to me sounds like what EVs were to cars, but EVs for boats. Is that right? Or is there some more nuance that I'm really not hitting on the head?
That gets you a decent way to what we're kind of doing. An analogy we like to use is the thing that really turned the tables on electric vehicles going from kind of niche weird stuff to actually mainstream and good was lithium ion batteries. You could get the energy density in a car, so you could get a range that's like 250, 300 miles, of which a customer is like, yep, that'll do. That works for me. If it's only 50 miles and you're going to charge it like for 24 hours, then you're like, okay, well, this is stupid. This isn't going to work. But at the 250 kind of mile range with the lithium ion batteries, it's now a good product that people want to buy it. Hydrofoils are going to do to boats what the lithium batteries did to cars, in that if you just took lithium batteries and an electric motor, put it in a boat today, you don't really see any benefit. It gets quieter, the maintenance goes down, but the range you get is very small. The top speed at 30 knots, you'll blow through your battery in 90 minutes or something, even less. And then it might even take you 2 days to charge it on a level 2 charger. This is the energy consumption of boats is an order of magnitude higher than cars. So what we're doing is kind of, the EV transformation, but you need to bring in another set of technology, not just lithium batteries.
Okay. And so what does the business model look like right now?
Yeah. So for us, we're starting with this recreational product. There are 80,000 person watercraft or jet skis sold per year. About 70% of that sold to North America. Americans love this kind of a thing. High volume, people buy them as toys. The engineering development and iteration on a smaller vehicle is probably about 4 times faster than a bigger vehicle. And in a startup, that's super important. You never get anything right the first time, but if it takes you 2 years, say, to iterate, you think about your burn rate, you think about the CapEx on that. If it takes you 10 years to get to a product that's actually good, then, you don't have a very good business. Once we've launched and started to dominate the personal watercraft market with the Valo hydrofoil, and it's a very exciting product, people look at our prototype on the water and they're like, what the hell is that? This is amazing. This is like nothing I've ever seen before. Tell me more about it. We're then going to be clever and take the technology we've developed in the Valo hydrofoil and package it up into a product that other boat builders can utilize in their existing designs. So if you look at the boat market, there's maybe 2,000 different boat builders and thousands more variants of boats. This is just the nature of boats. Everyone wants something very different. However, in the propulsion side of things, the engine manufacturers, there's about 5 of them. Each of them have about 20% market share. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking our hydrofoil propulsion and lift and control software technology as a package, providing this to boat builders so they can install it on their vehicles, just like they put on a Yamaha outboard, and they can put on this, outboard engine of the future.
So the competitors aren't the boat companies, but it's more of the engines going forward. That's really who you're competing with when you look forward and you look at the business model and getting it to market. Because if the customer wants this, the boats can, have their custom model where it can fit with the Valo technology, right? The hydrofoil technologies. So that's who you're competing with going forward?
Yeah, I think the major competition is just against the status quo. People say, well, do I want the new thing or do I want to stick with the traditional kind of technology? An important aspect of that we're hyper focused on is scale. So we're competing against folks who think maybe, I can't even remember the number, millions of outboard engines made per year. The scale that they can leverage to get the prices down is very powerful. If we were just making our own boat, say we just made our own, 30-foot boat, we might do 200, 300 boats per year. That does not unlock the scale you need to bring the manufacturing costs all the way down in order to make a product that's now competitive with all these other products that have massive scale. But with the Valo hydrofoil first, naturally, high scale market, 80,000 person watercraft, $1.5 billion a year spent on this kind of stuff. And then we take exactly the same stuff and put it into systems. We then get the scale, the price can come down for manufacturing, and then we can offer it to our customers at a price that is now competitive with the existing stuff. So they can say, well, it's about the same price and it seems better. Let's buy that one.
See, you talked about right now fighting against the status quo, just because the technology is not new, but people don't see it in everyday life. So what are some of the headwinds that you've experienced just fighting the status quo? And then what has been the customer receptiveness when they see this product and they get excited to want to pre-order the product?
Yeah. Just like with any new thing that people haven't experienced yet or hasn't been in the mainstream for a period of time, their natural reactions to think about everything that could go wrong. So they're like, "Oh, but what if the water's choppy? Or what if you hit a bit of seaweed? Or what if the water's shallow?" Things like that. Another comparison, say you were trying to describe a modern highway and a highway driving car. And you say, okay, we're going to make a steel box, put 5 seats in it with burn gasoline in explosions. We're going to drive at 70 miles an hour down this piece of tarmac and coming the other direction at another 70 miles an hour, only like 4 feet away from you is a different car. You're going to do this all day long. And they'll be like, well, that's that. What if you hit something? What if you crash into them? And they'd be like, well, yeah, you die. That's the world we live in. And these risks are all acceptable and whatever. So it's just a matter of, first we've got to engineer through these problems and design a thing that actually makes sense and usable, which is what we're taking very seriously. So CTO Rio, he's a boat guy. He's owned 30 boats in his life. He lives on a boat. So when it comes to designing the thing, he's like, that's not a good idea because this is not how boats work. What was the second part of your question? I forgot.
It was just challenging the status quo. Oh, the customer receptiveness.
Customer reception.
Yeah.
That's a great one. We try to describe to people what the experience is on, a Valo hydrofoil. It's a hydrofoiling vehicle. So you come up off the surface of the water. It's incredibly quiet, near silent. We try to describe this to people and they say, well, how's it going to be different from like a Sea-Doo or something like that? And we're like, well, it's a completely different experience. It's magical. It feels so fun. It's like powder skiing. It's hard to describe the sensation of skiing in deep powder, but people love it. They queue up for hours and spend thousands of dollars just to experience this and go heli skiing, all this nonsense. So we've had a few key examples where we've had like one of our backers, he was very skeptical. He's like, I own 3 jet skis. I do it all the time. I hear these things you're saying. I don't quite get it. Came down, rode it, came back to the dock after like 15 seconds and he's like, I get it. I had the aha moment. It's a whole different new thing. You're like on this magic carpet floating out there. The wind's in your ears. You don't feel any of the chop. It's completely different. He's like, I'm investing. Similar experience with another guy, David Cerner from Founders Podcast, came and rode the thing. He's a jet ski owner down in Florida. And he was like, okay, I get this now. This is a thing. So
did David rode the Valo?
He did. Yeah.
Really? Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, well, watching the video, the best word I could use to describe it was gliding, but gliding not in the sense of when you're on the boat and the water's clear. This is gliding in the sense of you're moving fast. It just looks like you can turn. You just look free. It's a really, really tough thing to describe. And I'm sure once you experience it, it just blows away any description I could ever come up with. But the go-to-market strategy, how are people going to be able to get this product, buy this product? What's that strategy of getting the product into the customer's hands?
We launched the product maybe 12, 14 months ago. We had some nice renders of it. We had a descriptor of the main specs. We described how it would work. And we just put that out there into the world, got a few articles written about it. And then we just took reservations, and then people just started wanting them and paid $1,000 to reserve spots. So we've had about 60 vehicles reserved now. This is more than we can produce in the first, stretch of what we're planning to do. So there's plenty of folks out there that want one. And this is before we've really marketed it hard, before they could even experience one. Imagine trying to buy a Ferrari and all you saw was renders. So in a few months' time, we're going to have what we call the production validation vehicle. It's pretty much the first production version we've got. It'll be exactly like what the customers pretty much get, and they'll demo it, they'll ride it, they'll experience it, and we can probably run through, 10 demos per day, recharge the thing at the dock, do another 10, do that 7 days a week in all the major locations. We've got famous YouTubers already reaching out. Supercar Blondie's like, yep, can we do a demo? Get this to Dubai and we're on it. There's 10 million viewers. Awesome. I haven't even started to scratch the surface. Because it looks so cool, people will want to be seen on it. That'll be the main engine for our growth. And then it's just a matter for the engineering team and Rio to just build them.
Well, it looks like the future. It really does. And this is just the first version. So the first version right now looks comparable to a jet ski with just how many people can sit on it and the size. but what's the vision going forward? It looked like on Wefunder, because you're currently raising on Wefunder, that you're thinking, all right, well, it's not just going to be this one product, but we're going to expand. We're going to then go to maybe a John boat size, then maybe a slightly bigger boat.
That's right.
The ultimate vision is cargo.
Yeah. So we see opportunities across the entire spectrum of the marine space, probably up to about 36 or, call it 110, 120 feet, which in ship sizes, I think they get up to about, they get pretty big. So the biggest we see this opportunity going is like an air freight replacement, a micro container ship doing short sea shipping. The deep water massive container ships that we see, they are the most efficient way of moving anything on the planet, period. But they take 15 days to get across the Pacific. You have to wait until it's completely full. You can only go to giant harbors and ports around the world. So whilst being super efficient, they have restrictions, which is why air freight exists. There's a huge opportunity to replace air freight with a small, fast vessel that can compete on transit time. And also, if it's not an airplane now, it's a ship. The costs are about, the cost base is about a quarter. So we've got a partnership with Blue Orca Marine, a venture out of Canada, who's going to be building these, 36 meter style, Argo style vessels. And we're going to be supplying the foiling technology and control system software to them. And, that's one example of that size. We've got plans for, rigid inflatable boats, 18-foot boats. We've got a partnership. We've got a pilot project with a shipbuilder, and we're going to be making an 18-foot foiling electric, like a 6-person boat, which will be finished, summer or whatever, fall this year. And then it's just a matter of making bigger systems, the same systems on the Valo Hyperhaul. There's more power and more lift, and then they can just be installed on bigger and bigger vessels for more and more commercial purposes.
Now, I got a little ahead over my skis. What's the story behind Valo? What's it come about?
Great question.
It's a unique idea.
I think the furthest back in time this can be traced, I was about 12 years old. I grew up in a city called Canberra, Australia. So if you haven't already noticed, I'm not from around here. I'm Australian. Canberra is the capital of Australia, 300,000 odd people, somewhere between Sydney and Melbourne. So Australia's a small place, 25 million population, very isolated. And Canberra's small as well. Anyway, my dad, he was always a tinkerer and an inventor, showed me this video of some MIT grad students that built a hydrofoil boat out of a rowing scull. They had some guy pedaling a bike. And as it took off, it popped up out of the water, and then it broke a world record for a human-powered boat speed record. And I was like, that's cool. Yeah. So I'm 12 years old, of course. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. Good one. It would be cool to make something like that one day. But I'm 12 years old in Canberra, Australia. What am I going to do about it? Fast forward another, 10 years. I've graduated from university. I'm a civil engineer grad, start a PhD in coastal engineering and oceanography. Still, I'm like, it'd be cool to make a foiling something. And then that was probably when I started to think a personal watercraft, like a thing you could ride and experience, and it's sort of pure, and it's you in the water in this kind of thing, almost like mountain biking or skiing or motocross riding, high performance, exhilarating. I think that's when the idea kind of got in my head of how can I make this thing? Again, I had no idea where to start, not the most entrepreneurial place back then in Australia. Did the PhD, started a startup at the same time. Turns out the startup was more interesting than the PhD. So I drove to the PhD and started this e-commerce startup. From that, started another startup with a photography marketplace called Snapper. And then with Snapper, we applied to Y Combinator. So in 2017, we came to the US, did the YC batch, grew that company. And at that time, I started meeting all these other folks. In particular, a good friend of mine named Jeff from Ride Electric. He was making electric 737s. An electric passenger plane, a 200 passenger, like a Boeing 737. And he was going to make an electric version, and he was funded. And I'm like, wow, how did you do that? He's like, well, you just come up with a picture of what you want to build, send it to some people, and then go from there. And I'm like, shit, this is the place to be. California is where I can build this thing. So after about a year and a half, moved on from the Snapper company, still, on the board there, and then started what was called Boundary Light Technologies at the time, which morphed into Valo a couple of years ago. So that's kind of the origin. And it's been, I guess, a lifelong dream to make these vehicles and create this exciting and new way to experience the waterways and actually, do useful stuff with them as well.
Yeah. And I think we were talking earlier and you said, the water covers what, 70% of the earth?
Yes.
70% of the earth. People only use it as transportation to and from, but really not that often. fishing here and there, surfing maybe. There seems like there's so many opportunities to use the water for more. Like there's so many more purposes out there. And you mentioned that it makes almost zero noise and there's no wake either, which I think is really important. Growing up on the coast, it was always like you have to watch your wake, especially near beach houses, marshes, right? Just because erosion and then also too the wildlife. So maybe talk about that. And if you see this process going forward, zero wake, zero noise is going to help the ecosystem, the environment going forward if boats are like that.
Yeah. I was looking up the other day places that we could run demos of our vehicle, and San Francisco, Marin County all have pretty strict rules around where you can use a personal watercraft. And you can kind of see why. They're loud, kind of obnoxious, and make it kind of a big wake and splash. And the impact it has on the environment in the most general sense is pretty severe. Plus the fact they run on gasoline, have all kinds of oils and things, and have all kinds of emissions. I'm super excited for what will happen when you can now do the same kind of exploration, the same kind of enjoyment on the waterways without waking everybody up with this loud drone of the engine and the impeller, without putting wakes everywhere and without putting emissions in both the air and the water from all these, hydrocarbons and things like that. So that's on the purely recreational side of things. We see what we're creating as like, it's going to create a transportation revolution. It's going to be the same as what the railroads did. It's going to be the same as what the automobile did. It's going to be the same as what like passenger aircraft and jet aircraft did. If you can move people and stuff a little faster, a little cheaper, a little more conveniently, a little more comfortably, you only need a slight improvement on all of those categories. And all of a sudden you can flip an entire, way of doing things to a completely new mode. Because a car was just that little bit better. And then as a result, we have to build roads everywhere. We have to build gas stations to support this. Despite those hurdles, everyone now drives a car, and that's kind of really formed our cities. So I look forward to the next 10 years, and it's like, how will our cities be built and shaped and operate when you can move as easily over the water as you can over the land by using this technology?
Do you think the partnerships you've been able to establish are already a testament that this is a revolution, that there are other businesses that are excited for this to be the new way of water transportation going forward?
I think so. I think like we're just seeing the start. My job is to talk in broad strokes about the future and what all the kind of things, but time will kind of tell exactly how it manifests and who uses it. A lot of this stuff, it's got to be build it, and then people will try it out, and then they'll be, wow, this is actually really convenient for X and Y and Z. Like we've had people tell us that they want to ride one of our Valo hydrofoils from San Francisco to Oakland every day. They want to commute on this thing because it's smooth and you don't get wet compared to a normal jet ski or an e-foil board because you're up above the water. There's no splash. I mean, you wouldn't want to do it if it's raining or a storm. It's a recreational craft, not a commuter boat. But even that, is a micro example of people being like, this is how I could change how I live my life based on what this technology enables.
Now, with the hydrofoil technology, how does it do with waves? When the ocean gets a little rough, is it still able to handle and adjust for the roughness of the ocean?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's two types of waves. Think about, there's sort of wind chop or like small waves, which are, close together and, not that high. So with those, we do what's called just platforming. So we just slice straight through them. We kind of continue on a kind of straight line, and the waves just do their thing underneath the vehicle. And the size of those waves that we can clear is pretty much just a function of the size of the vehicle itself. The strut depth is in line with the length of the vehicle. So you double the length of the vehicle, the struts kind of get deeper. So as the vehicles get bigger and bigger, the waves that can be platformed or just sliced straight over get bigger along with that. The second type of waves is what we call swell in the oceanographic world. So this is big ocean swells. This is what the surfers ride on. But out in the deeper ocean, they're not very pointy. They're very smooth sinusoids. So with those, the way to navigate over them is what we call contouring. That's when you kind of drive over it like a car driving over like rolling hills. And that requires more advanced sensing and software. The more complicated world is now you've got both mixed together. You've got swell from different directions, different sizes, different periods, and wind chop, what we call a busy or confused ocean state. For most of the places, our customers will be using our first range of products, like not too much of an issue. But as you get into that, that's a really exciting opportunity for further development of the software. So you can try to figure out ahead of time what the water is doing and should we platform, should we contour, and how we do that.
And then another question just on the product is, how shallow can the water be for the hyperfoils to work in?
Yeah. So the draft of the Valo hyperfoil is about 6 feet. So that's if you're not on the foils, so you're just floating around and the foils are deployed, we tell our customers you don't want to be in water that's any shallower than 6 feet. Okay. Now, whilst you could play things fast and loose while you're foiling, your draft might be 3 feet, 2.5 feet. Yeah. But the question is, well, what happens if you stop foiling? If you've only got 3 feet of water and you can't actually land, then you're in a kind of tricky position. So that's a no-go. We don't want anyone to try that. So 6 feet of water is kind of the minimum operating for our vehicle. I've got a, cute little print.
That's a display.
Yeah. So the one behind me on the poster is the older design. This is the newer design. If you go to our website, you'll see the newer design. Newer design has 2 struts instead of 3. So more efficient, higher performing, more stable. The back strut will tilt and lift to get out of the way, and we'll be able to stop at multiple heights. So you can putt around in shallow water to get onto the beach or get onto the boat trailer. And the front strut retracts vertically and gets out of the way.
That's awesome.
So like I said before with Rio understanding boats and knowing what people will and won't like, we needed to make this as easy to use as a traditional personal watercraft. You have to be able to trailer it the same, launch and retrieve it the same, go on a boat lift the same, beach it the same. And that's what we kind of put into it. If it was too weird, then people are like, yeah, how do I get in the water? I need a crane. That's not going to fly. So yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned YC. So talk to us. How was the YC experience? Because you went twice. What are some of the biggest takeaways you learned from YC?
The thing I took away from YC the most, and it kind of happened both times, and this kind of gets distilled and rebroadcast to everybody through the partners at YC who have seen hundreds of companies, if not thousands, and not just any old companies. Like the most experienced partners there have advised like maybe 20, 30 companies that are worth more than $1 billion. So
it's insane.
They have seen these companies grow and scale over time. They've seen the ones that haven't grown and scaled. And so that, the insights they have like super unique and valuable. But despite all that, the advice that they give and the story they kind of give is always so simple. I've got this written on a poster in my other room, not this room, but what the motto of Y Combinator is: make something people want. It's a cool throwaway phrase, but in it is contained so much wisdom. You need to make something. You can't just talk about it. You got to go out and make it. And it's got to be something that people want. And how do you know if people want it? Well, they'll give you money for it. And if you take it away, they get sad. The top advice generally that I've taken from YC is like, well, make a thing. You should be working on your product and you should be talking to your customers. When the customers say, if they give you feedback on the product, then incorporate it. Just run that loop as many times per day as you possibly can. And you will have, the core of a successful startup company. That's it. That's as simple as that. Don't worry about all the externalities like, oh, we need to raise from a top tier fund and we need to get like Forbes 30 under 30 and we need to get all this other, we need to go network with these people. Like, make a product that people want, talk to your customers, repeat, and then everything should kind of, and don't run out of money. That's the other one.
Well, and I feel like that advice is so simple, but at the same time too, there's so many shiny objects as you go on your entrepreneurial journey, as you're on the startup, right? It's so tough to just stay focused and not look over here, not look over there.
Yeah. I mean, it's also like an effect of the kind of environment where people want attention for their ideas. So there's people making startups, great. And then there's other people talking about how you should make your startup and wanting to write stories and get clicks and views and stuff. And I don't think anyone's really ever made money selling a book that just has simple, obvious advice in it. The book needs to be controversial or have an idea that stands out. So if you spend your time reading TechCrunch or Twitter and whatever and like take startup advice, you probably get all these kind of, oh, we have to growth hack, we have to blitz scale, we have to be these crazy people that don't sleep, or 1 hour a day kind of thing. And we need to do all this shit because that's what would people like, oh, interesting. That's a controversial idea. Let's talk about it. But just like, no, just make a product that people want and then talk to them about it and then just repeat. It's hard to write an article about that, but that's actually the kind of the truth.
Well, and you talk about, making a product that people want and they'll pay you for the product. And now kind of connecting this with equity crowdfunding and raising on Wefunder. What I heard is that you decided to raise on Wefunder because some of your customers, some of your investors said, we want to invest. We want to be part of the company as well as have our own product. So can you walk us through the reasons behind you wanting to raise on Wefunder, how that's been, and then how you're going to allocate the funds going forward?
Yeah, we've been kind of watching equity crowdfunding for the last few years. It's become something that's quite exciting and quite interesting. So from just a pure interest point of view, we were like, let's give it a try. This seems interesting and a new thing that could be done. I mean, a lot of folks have done equity crowdfunding. I mean, even like Boom Supersonic did an equity campaign a way back. Fun fact. So there was that interest and intrigue, like this could be an interesting source of capital that we can tap. We have a very consumer-friendly product. It's a consumer product, which works well with the kind of audience on these markets. It's something that they can understand versus some like enterprise SaaS product that it's like, great. Our customers express interest and they're like, this is great. How can we get involved in more ways than just buying a product? Or if they, might not necessarily be in the market for a product, maybe they don't live near water, or maybe they don't it doesn't fit in their budget. They want to get involved somehow. Plus our friends and family and the broader community. And what equity crowdfunding kind of does is it opens up an opportunity for many more people to actually support and back and get exposure to these technologies that may, in fact, change their world. So that's kind of why we got into it. It's been a great experience, learned a lot, and it's a super interesting new form of capital. In terms of the use of funds, so in terms of the stage of where we're at, we're gearing up for production. So customers, lined up that want it, great. Lots of people want to write articles and demo it and, put it on YouTube and all that kind of stuff. Great. So going back to the YC motto, make something people want. We're now at the make stage. So what does gearing up for production mean? We're putting the finishing touches on the engineering designs for the vehicle we're going to put into production. There's tooling. So we need to make molds for the carbon hull and deck, wings, struts. These all kind of have a CapEx requirement, but we can use these tools for lots and lots of units. So that's kind of what the use of funds primarily is going towards. It's to gearing up to production, the CapEx for tooling and stuff, so we can get these products built out there in the market. And once they are built and are out there in the market, we're very excited about how everyone else is going to be about it. Once you see one of these things cruising through Miami, yeah, everyone will be like, that's great. I want one.
What I'm picturing is it's going to be much of a flywheel effect where it gets going, more and more momentum gets built up, and then it's going to just continue to get faster and faster and faster, especially when you see one of these just flying across. Oh, dude, I can't wait to see one. I can't wait to see that happen. I want to ride one too, but I always tell people the beauty of equity crowdfunding is that it turns the customers into investors, into advocates. And for startups, that's some of the best, you want advocates. I think as Paul Graham says, I'd much rather have 100 advocates than 100,000 customers. It's kind of those people that are going to be by your side and love your product that much, and they're going to tell everyone else about that product. And a great way to raise capital, and it's a great way to get the product out and build awareness. But talking about the 5 to 10 year vision, what's your 5 to 10 year vision? What are you imagining? Kind of what's the roadmap to get there?
Yeah. I see in 10 years' time, the big picture for Valo is we're going to be the de facto company and supplier of all foiling technology for the entire marine sector, whether it's small, medium, large, mega large, whether it's recreational, commercial, military, public transport. We will be so well placed and so skilled at making these things. If 1 in 2 boats out there is a foiling boat, I expect that 99% of those foiling boats will have our technology on it. It's almost like self-driving cars in that there's a network effect. The more you have out there, the more data you're collecting, and the better the software and the control system can get. The more experience these vehicles have in the difficult operating conditions. So the software of keeping a vehicle like this stable through waves and chopping through turns is actually really hard. This is one of the major reasons why you don't see that many foiling boat companies, is keeping the vehicle stable in these water conditions is actually super hard. It's a very unstable vehicle and it has to operate in a very narrow band of altitude. If an aircraft moves up and down 100 feet, you don't really notice. It's fine. We have to operate an altitude band of accuracy of about 6 inches. So 10 years time, I think everything will be foiling. Foiling is the future. We'll look back and be like, why didn't we not do this sooner? We reduced the energy consumption by 15 times. This is mind-blowing. And we're going to be there and be the provider of all of this stuff.
And again, for the listeners out there, they love this idea, where can they invest?
Yeah. So if you go to our website, ridevalo.com, we've got links to the Wefunder campaign there. You could also go to wefunder.com/Valo, VALO. We say Valo like Halo, like the recently completed Halo television series. Valo means light in Finnish. We also thought it was just a cool name and it kind of encompasses the future vision of what we want to kind of do. So yeah, the campaign's live. We're having great traction and performance on that. Lots of people are very excited about what we're building and wanting to be a part of it. So yeah, either go to ridevalo.com or wefunder.com/Valo.
And now I got 2 questions left, rapid questions. So what is the most influential book you read, or your favorite book, the one that if you have one book left to read, you're going to read it?
That's a great question. One that I've read recently that I very much enjoyed was by Ashley Vance, and it was the one about the rocket companies. And I found that book quite inspiring in some senses. So it was called, I think, When the Heavens Went on Sale. And it's by Ashley Vance. He's the guy that wrote the first major biography of Elon Musk. Great guy. So he does a quick bit on SpaceX, but then follows Astra, Firefly, and Rocket Lab, and tells the story of how they went from, and also Planet Labs, how they went from just a startup to where they got to. And some amazing insights in there about similarities and differences between the companies. And the story about Rocket Lab in particular, these are some folks, just nerds from New Zealand. I already had a little speech about how Australia is isolated. Try New Zealand, yet they built a rocket company in New Zealand. And it's arguably one of the, after SpaceX, probably the most successful private rocket companies out there. They're launching satellites and they're crushing it. So how they pulled that off is a very inspirational story.
Though that's amazing. I wrote it down, so I'm going to have to read it soon. Advice for aspiring entrepreneurs. You can go back in time. What advice would you give them?
I think it would just be related to that YC motto of just make something people want. And in that is so much wisdom. So what you make is important. You have skills, expertise, passion, network, and environment around you. And what you make should consider all that. If you have been working in the mining industry, you know so much about that, then maybe you should make a mining product because you'll have a market advantage over that versus, let's just make another social networking. Also, your personal skills should be considered. And if you don't have the skills you need maybe to make the thing, then take your time, get the skills, then make the thing maybe. And then once you've made a thing, make it quickly. It doesn't have to be the full thing. It could just be a picture of the thing. It could be a sentence describing the thing. It could be a drawing or a schematic. Then you need to show a customer, someone that your hypothesis is may want this thing, and show them as soon as you can and say, I'm making this. What do you think? And just let them talk. And then you should listen and then, pay attention and then do that to a lot of people and then kind of work that loop, and fingers crossed you'll have a good startup.
Great advice. I feel like it's really simple. Knowing me, I know I'm going to overcomplicate it, but thank you for the great advice.
No worries.
Ed, real quick before you go, where can people find you, contact you? Yeah, if they have a question, where's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, well, if your viewers just want to shoot me an email directly, ed@ridevalo.com, just ed@ridevalo.com. It's pretty straightforward. I'm always open to answering folks' questions and giving them advice and stuff. If you also go to our website or Instagram, you can probably find some email addresses there. And I'll probably read them all anyway.
Well, Ed, I appreciate you coming on. And Valo with a V, like Halo, but Valo. Check out Valo on Wefunder, raising capital. When will the round end?
Probably, we're looking about summer for a close on the campaign. Yeah.
That sounds good. Well, everyone check it out. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. And as always, see you next time on Next Big Thing HQ. So long.